Welcome to another deep dive. We'll be taking a look into the book business.
The book business.
It's something that I think we all have some experience with.
Absolutely.
Whether it's, going to the library as a kid or
Yeah.
buying the latest
Blockbuster.
thriller, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a really, really interesting business, and it's changed so much over the years.
For sure.
And that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's so fascinating about the book business is that it's always been this kind of like intersection between these huge forces, right? So you have like technology, obviously.
Right.
You have the spread of ideas and knowledge. And you have just like basic economics, like profit and, greed and all that.
Yeah.
And they all like crash together.
Yeah, and they've been in this constant
Right.
push and pull.
Totally.
Since the very beginning.
Yeah. It's a really like dynamic system, and it's always changing.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
it's just to illustrate the point of how much it's changed. I mean, I think sometimes we forget that there was a time when books were
Yeah.
not
Right.
accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
They were incredibly expensive.
Absolutely. It was like owning a luxury car or something.
Yeah.
Like, only the very wealthy or like institutions like the church would have these massive libraries.
Yeah, like some of the manuscripts that we've looked at are worth the equivalent of like
Oh, yeah, easily.
$75,000 today.
At least, you think about it, they were hand copied, right?
Yeah.
Like every single page, someone sat there with a quill and ink and these beautiful illuminations. And
Unbelievable.
it was an
Yeah,
art form. It was,
talking about an expensive book, it's like that's...
yeah, and the materials too, right? Like parchment and vellum.
Yeah.
These are not cheap materials to
Yeah.
come by.
No.
So it really does make you think about, like how much our relationship to books has changed just in terms of accessibility.
Well, and even the idea of owning a book, like you said,
Yeah.
it didn't necessarily, even if you could afford it,
Right.
doesn't mean that you could even read it.
Exactly. Like literacy was not widespread.
Right.
So even if you had a book, it was more like a status symbol.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I own a book.
I own a book. Look at me.
Fancy.
Exactly.
But can you read it?
Who knows?
No.
Maybe, maybe not.
And that makes me think about Socrates and
Oh, yeah.
his, skepticism of
The written word.
the written word.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny that we only know his views on literacy
Right.
because Plato wrote them down?
Because Plato wrote them down. It's like the ultimate irony, right?
Yeah.
Like he was skeptical of writing, but we only know that because of writing.
Right.
It's kind of a mind bender.
It is.
But yeah, it shows you how much we depend on this,
Yeah.
even when we question it.
Right. And so then enters Gutenberg.
Gutenberg.
And he's often
the OG.
Yeah. Right. He's like the Steve Jobs of
The 15th
the
century.
15th century. Yeah, he's credited with like ushering in this whole new era of
Right.
mass communication.
But did you know that he actually died bankrupt?
I did know that. Yeah, it's one of those like, history is stranger than fiction kind
Yeah.
of things.
Right.
Because you think Gutenberg printing press revolutionized everything,
Right.
but he himself wasn't exactly
Yeah.
rolling in dough.
Yeah, his Bibles, while revolutionary,
Yeah.
were still really expensive.
They were expensive, and I think people weren't as, clamoring to buy a Bible as he thought they would be.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's actually the cheaper pamphlets and the
Yeah, like the flyers and the
early advertising.
early advertising. That's what really kept his financier's business afloat.
So marketing and advertising,
Essential.
essential back then.
Always have been,
Wow.
even for Gutenberg.
So speaking of Gutenberg's financier, Johann First,
Yeah.
the printing press, didn't it also like freak out the authorities a little bit? His
Imagine
new technology that can just like,
spread information like wildfire,
yeah,
right?
it's like the internet.
Exactly. And the
Yeah.
authorities, they were like, wait a minute. We can't have just anyone saying anything.
Good.
So yeah, they were definitely freaking out.
So were they right to be worried though?
From their perspective, yeah, because it completely upended the power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Like monarchs were terrified of sedition.
Right.
The church was like heresy.
Yeah.
They were trying to hold on. So it seems like this battle for control over information, it's been going on forever.
Oh yeah, this is not a new thing.
It's just the technology changes,
The tools change.
but the game's the same.
Yeah, the game's the same.
And that makes me think about another issue that's kind of plagued the book business
Okay.
since the beginning, and that's piracy.
Piracy. Oh, yeah.
Now, I always thought of that as like a modern problem.
Right, like with the internet and
You know,
everything.
digital files and everything.
Right.
But it actually was a huge problem in early America.
Oh, yeah. Massive problem.
Really?
Huge.
Why were colonists pirating books?
Okay, so a couple of reasons, right? First off, books were expensive.
Still?
Still expensive even after you ship them across the Atlantic.
Right.
So pirated copies were cheaper
Okay.
and easier to come by.
Makes sense.
And plus, a lot of colonists saw it as a way to kind of like stick it to the man, you know?
Yeah, like those British publishers.
Exactly.
We don't like you.
Yeah.
We're going to pirate your books.
We're going to make our own rules.
Okay, so it was about
Yeah.
rebelling against high prices
Wow.
and like
Absolutely.
religious control.
It was about access and independence.
It wasn't just about getting a good deal.
No, it was about something bigger.
It was about
Yeah.
sticking it to the man.
Sticking it to the man.
I like it.
A little bit of a rebellious spirit.
Yeah. So it's funny how we think about, the book business
Right.
hundreds of years ago, and we think of,
Right.
these quaint little bookshops and,
Quaint little
bookshops, just trying to
Right.
spread knowledge.
Right.
But in reality, it was a business like
Yeah.
any other
Run by
people trying to
make a buck.
see today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh.
Same as it ever was.
Yeah. And, speaking of which, let's talk about Samuel Garish.
Oh, yeah. Samuel Garish.
He knew how to sell a book.
He knew how to sell a book.
He would invite people to his shop.
Okay. For lively discussions fueled by ale.
Smart man.
And then he would
Very smart.
introduce his books.
Oh, yeah. Once they've had a few pints,
Yeah. Well,
loosen them up a little bit.
What a great idea.
Yeah, he understood his audience.
He understood his market.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like the 17th century version of like
Right.
a literary salon.
A literary salon meets a pub crawl.
Yeah.
There you go.
Got that.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
That's Samuel Garish for you.
So he knew that, selling books
Yeah.
was about more than just the book itself.
It's about the experience.
It was about creating an experience,
Yeah.
building a community,
Community is huge.
sparking conversation.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I think we still see today,
Oh, for sure.
even if the methods have changed.
Yeah. The methods have evolved, but the principle's the same.
The principle's the same.
Yeah. You want people to feel like they're part of something
Right.
when they buy a book.
Yeah.
It's not just a transaction. It's like joining a club,
Exactly.
the book club.
And I think that's a great
Yeah.
note to
Oh,
end on
It is a good note
for part one.
for part one.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, like, the novel as a form of storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of take it for granted now, right?
Totally.
But it was a pretty recent invention.
It's true. Like, go back a few hundred years, and it's all like epic poems and plays and religious text.
Right.
The novel was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, like long prose narratives about
Yeah.
regular people.
Like everyday life. Exactly. And it really took off with Pamela.
Pamela, that was like the
Yeah.
first
The big one.
big hit.
Huge hit.
Yeah, Samuel Richardson's Pamela.
It was like a publishing sensation.
Yeah.
I mean, it was everywhere.
It really popularized that epistolary form right
Yeah,
there.
that whole like telling the story through letters thing
Right.
was huge.
Really gave you a glimpse into what
Yeah.
characters were thinking.
Yeah. Totally. Like you got right inside their heads.
And it basically created the romance genre.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Pamela was flying off the shelves. People couldn't get enough of it.
Everyone wanted to read about a young servant woman
Navigating the perils of
and her employer.
high society and,
It's interesting, too, because it really resonated with,
oh, huge.
yeah.
Women readers.
I mean, it was a story about a woman,
Right.
for women, written by a man, but,
It really tapped into something
Oh, absolutely.
that I think,
And you can see the legacy today.
yeah.
I mean, romance is still one of the most popular genres out there.
And it makes you wonder, like, what's going to be the next Pamela?
Right.
What's the next?
What's that next genre-defining book?
Yeah.
Someone out there is writing it right now.
I hope so.
And, while we're talking about groundbreaking books,
Yeah.
we got to mention children's literature.
Oh, yeah.
That was also emerging around this time.
Like Goody Two-Shoes.
Goody Two-Shoes. There you go.
It's such a classic story. And it's like
Yeah.
the great-great-grandmother of like
It's like the OG.
Harry Potter
Yeah.
and Narnia.
All the greats.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, and it's still relevant today. I mean, it's about this plucky heroine who overcomes adversity
Right.
through hard work and kindness, and
Timeless.
it is timeless. Timeless themes.
It's also interesting to think about how authors back then navigated the whole publishing world.
Totally.
Because it was a different world.
It was a hustle.
It was a hustle.
You really had to hustle.
Like Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah, Mark Twain. He was a marketing genius.
Yeah, he knew how to create a buzz.
He did. He really did.
Like, he went on these lecture tours.
Right.
He was friends with all the newspaper guys.
Right.
He knew how to play the game.
He built a brand.
He built a brand before branding was even a thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, he wasn't the only one.
Right.
Dickens,
too.
Oh, yeah, even Dickens had to deal with piracy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, this was a time when
Because printing was cheaper, right?
printing was getting cheaper.
Yeah.
You had mass production.
So more books.
More books, but also more
For piracy.
piracy. Yeah, exactly.
That's so fun.
And Dickens, he was actually a big advocate for international copyright law.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, he was like, this is not right.
But his own books were being pirated,
But his own books were all over the place.
especially in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, especially in the U.S.
That's so funny.
It's like the Wild West of publishing back then.
Wild West. That's a good way to put it.
Anything goes.
It really highlights that tension between, you know,
Yeah.
making books affordable
Right.
and protecting the authors.
The rights of the creator.
Right.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And it's still going on today.
Oh, yeah, it's still a hot topic.
But let's get back to like the 19th century.
Okay.
Because this is when innovations like the steam-powered press
Oh, yeah.
and offset printing,
Huge game changer.
game changers,
Yeah.
really transformed the industry.
They really ramped up production.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly, you could print way more books, way faster,
The books became
more affordable.
more affordable.
Exactly.
But I imagine that also shifted the power dynamic a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because now you have publishers becoming way more powerful.
Because they're the ones with the
They're the ones with the money.
money.
They're the ones with the printing presses.
Right.
So authors now, they're not working directly with printers anymore.
Right.
They're dealing with these publishing houses.
So they're like the gatekeepers now.
Exactly. They're the gatekeepers.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's when you start to see the rise of like the modern publishing house.
Right. So authors are kind of like
Yeah.
cogs in the machine.
Yeah. You can say that.
Interesting.
It becomes a lot more corporate.
So more books,
Okay.
lower prices,
Right.
but less authorial control.
That's the trade-off.
And then department stores came along
Oh, yeah.
and just blew everything up again.
Talk about disruption, right?
Yeah.
The department stores were like the Amazon of their day
They could just offer such steep discounts.
because they were buying in bulk
Right.
and they were using books as loss leaders.
What does that mean?
Basically, they'd sell books at a loss
Really?
just to get people in the door.
Wow.
Yeah, so you'd come in for the cheap books and then
Buy everything else.
you'd end up buying a new hat or a tea kettle.
Wow.
You were smart.
Smart.
Yeah.
And that must have been really hard on independent bookstores.
Oh, yeah, they were struggling.
Because they couldn't.
They couldn't compete with those prices.
Right.
It's tough to compete with a loss leader.
So it's like lower prices,
Right.
but less variety.
Exactly. And this is a trend that we see continuing
Yeah.
like throughout the 20th century with the rise of chain bookstores.
Yeah. It's crazy how just these little changes can
Yeah.
just completely.
Like a domino effect.
Yeah, it really is.
One thing leads to another.
And speaking of domino effects,
Yeah.
let's talk about the paperback.
Oh, the paperback revolution.
Yeah.
Game changer.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Jason Epstein,
Yeah.
editor at Doubleday.
Young guy with a vision.
Yeah.
And he's like, what if we print good books,
Yeah.
but small
Yeah. And cheap.
and cheap?
It seems obvious now.
Right. Like, why didn't anyone think of this before?
But it was a gamble.
Oh, yeah. People thought he was nuts.
Really?
They were like, you're going to kill the hardcover.
They thought it would cannibalize.
Cannibalize the industry.
Wow.
But Epstein, he had this hunch
Yeah.
that people actually wanted to own more books.
They just couldn't afford it.
Exactly.
And he was right.
He was right.
Because paperbacks made reading
Accessible
accessible
for everyone.
For everyone.
It wasn't just for the wealthy anymore.
You could own a whole library
Yeah.
on a budget.
I mean, and think about it. They were portable.
Right.
You could stick them in your pocket.
You could take them anywhere.
Take them anywhere.
They weren't
Right.
intimidating.
No,
Like those
yeah.
big. You don't walk into a cafe with like a giant
Yeah, exactly.
like leather bound.
Nobody's impressed.
Nobody's impressed by that.
You whip out a paperback.
There you go.
You're looking cool.
You're like, I'm a reader on the go.
I'm intellectual.
Exactly.
So paperbacks take off,
Huge.
but then another shift happens.
Oh, yeah.
Chain cook stores.
The rise of the chains.
Yeah.
Game changer.
They could demand such big discounts.
Oh, yeah, because they're buying in bulk.
Right.
They're like, we'll take 1,000 copies of this,
Wow.
2,000 of that.
And lower prices for consumers.
Right, so everybody wins.
But
Right?
except maybe
Except
the
maybe,
independent bookstores,
yeah, those poor independent bookstores.
they couldn't compete.
How do you compete with that?
So it's like you said, lower prices,
Lower prices, but less variety, less diversity.
Because they're only stocking what's going to sell.
They need the surefire hits,
Right.
the best sellers. And this is a trend that continues.
Right.
You know, like, it's all about consolidation.
And then the big one hits.
Oh, yeah.
The media conglomerates.
Here come the big guys.
It's all starting to sound very familiar.
Right, big companies, big money, big authors.
Yeah, and everything.
It's the corporatization of the book business.
Yeah.
Like when publishing went from like a gentleman's agreement to like Wall Street.
And I imagine they weren't just
Oh, no.
hands-off owners.
No, they were all about the bottom line.
Right, so they're looking for
The big bucks,
blockbuster, but
blockbuster potential,
give me the next Stephen King.
Well-
Give me the next Danielle Steele.
the mega selling authors.
Exactly. And they were willing to pay big bucks for them too.
Right. Huge advances.
Huge advances, marketing blitzes.
Making sure those books were everywhere.
Everywhere you looked, it was that book.
But what about the authors who weren't writing
Yeah.
thrillers or romances?
The little guys.
Yeah.
It became tougher for them.
They got lost in the shuffle a little bit. Yeah, it's harder to get noticed when you're not part of that big machine.
It's interesting how we've gone from hand-copied manuscripts
Right.
to mass-produced paperbacks
Yeah.
to these corporate-owned publishing houses.
From the quill to the printing press to the boardroom,
It's a long way.
it is a long, strange trip.
Yeah.
And it's not over yet.
Oh, no.
Because then comes the digital revolution.
Of course.
Like just when you thought things couldn't get any wilder.
Yeah, enter the internet.
Ebooks, print on demand, online retailers.
Amazon.
Amazon.
It's like,
The whole industry gets flipped on its head again.
it happens so fast.
It did. I mean, one minute we're all like, what's an ebook?
Right.
The next minute everyone's got a Kindle.
I remember when ebooks were a novelty.
Right.
And now
Now it's like normal.
I buy more ebooks than physical books.
Me too. It's just so easy.
And then print on demand.
Oh, yeah.
That was huge.
Huge. Because now you don't have to print like thousands of copies.
Right.
And hope they sell.
Right, just print them when you need them.
Exactly. It's like custom made books.
So it's good for the environment too.
Better for the environment.
Less waste.
Less waste. Less risk.
Less risk for the publisher.
Exactly.
It sounds like a win-win.
It does sound like a win-win.
Right. But of course, there's always a catch.
There's always a catch.
And that catch is
Amazon.
the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
I mean, they just kind of dominate.
Dominate everything.
They're everywhere.
Physical books,
Yeah.
digital books.
Digital books.
They're even publishing their own books now.
Oh, yeah. Amazon publishing.
It's hard to keep up.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's like they're everywhere you turn.
So how are traditional publishers
Yeah.
even dealing with this?
It's tough. I mean, they're trying to adapt.
Right.
They're experimenting with new business models.
Okay.
They're trying to figure out this whole digital thing.
Yeah.
They're trying to build relationships directly with readers.
Okay, so it's
That's a work in progress.
so work in progress.
It is, but, you know, that's the book business for you.
Always changing.
Always changing.
Oh, okay.
So where does that leave us?
That is the million-dollar question.
What's next?
What is next for the book business?
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say, but you know what?
Mm.
People still love to read.
That's true.
As long as there's stories to tell
Right.
and people who want to hear them,
Mhm.
the book business will find a way.
I think you're right.
It's always found a way.
It always has.
It's like a cockroach.
A cockroach.
You can't kill it.
I don't know if that's
Resilient?
resilient. Okay, I like that better.
There you go.
Well, it's been fascinating
Yeah.
taking this look at the book business
It's a wild ride
from the very
from
beginning
those ancient scribes to the digital age
to now
to the future.
to whatever comes next.
Exactly, and it just shows you like at the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's all about that desire to share knowledge,
Yeah, share stories.
to connect with each other. And that's not going away.
No, it's human nature.
So next time you pick up a book,
Yeah.
take a moment to think about
Yeah.
the long and fascinating.
The incredible journey it took to get there.
It really is incredible.
It is. And who knows what the next chapter holds.
Who knows?
But I'm sure it'll be interesting.
I think it will too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Yeah, this was fun.
It's your